Hi everyone, this is Sumant from Decode Now. Welcome to this video where we'll be interacting with GitHub REST APIs using web client. So in the previous video, we logged into GitHub using OAuth 2.0 from our Java Spring Boot application. So in this video, we'll be interacting with the endpoints exposed by GitHub. So to be precise, the endpoint which we would be interacting with is get all repositories. So for a particular account, what are all the repositories present? Just list that. So it's a get endpoint. We will be interacting with that. And before jumping into the code, let's look at the documentation of that. So this is the documentation of list the organization repositories, and it goes something like this, and the response looks something like this, as you can see here in the example schema. And here we will be extracting just the one field, which is the name field. Here it says hello world. Similarly, what are all the repositories are present, all the names would be present here, and we would be just extracting that. So I'll just paste the link of this documentation in the description. Please do check it out. So let's jump into the coding section. So in the code, the first step is since we are using web client, we need we need a dependency called web flux. So I'll just add that, say dependency Spring Boot starter web flux. So this is the dependency that we need to implement web client. So web client, using web client, we will be interacting with the GitHub REST APIs. So it's of group ID spring framework.boot. And once done, I will be needing one more dependency just to avoid the boilerplate code, which is from Lombok, and it's from group ID project Lombok. I'll just load the Maven changes after adding the two dependencies. One is the Spring Boot starter web flux and the other is the Lombok. Once all the dependencies are resolved, now the second step would be to add a model class, because as you can see in the documentation, we would be accessing this particular name. So for this API to respond, right, we need a model class. So let me just create a model class in this project. I'll say model, and under model I would say something like a Java class saying GitHub repo response. And what will this GitHub repo response have? It will have some annotations like data and getter and setter, and next we would also have this builder. So basically what this annotations does is getter and setter helps us with getting there is no need for us to write the get method and the set method, so it takes care of this boilerplate code. And builder annotation allows us to build this whenever we want to create an object of type GitHub repo response. This builder helps us to build the object. And inside, since we are only taking this one parameter, that is the name, we would be needing only one JSON property, and I would say JSON property inside we should provide the name, and here name is just the name, that is the key value which is present here. And if you want node ID, you would say node ID. If you want ID, you would say ID. Same goes to all the other fields. Since we need only name here, I'm just giving JSON property name, and I will assign this to one string variable and call it as name itself. So basically what we are doing here is we are creating a model class called GitHub repo response, and here it has only one field, which is the name field. We will be needing two constructors. One is the default constructor. We also call it as no arguments constructor, because it takes no arguments. It goes something like public and the name of the class, which is GitHub repo response, and it accepts no parameters. And the second thing we need to add is the custom constructor. So let me add the comment saying it has custom constructor, and it accepts parameters. It accepts only one parameter, which is the name field. So that also goes something like not private, public, and the same name as the class, and it accepts one parameter which is of type string, and its name is name, and the value it said we should say this dot name equals name. So basically this is our model class called GitHub repo response, which has only one field, a default constructor and a custom constructor. So the next step would be to develop the controller class and the service class. So let me just first create a controller class. I would say a package controller, and inside the package I'll say a class called GitHub controller, and I would like to mark this controller class with the annotation REST controller and another annotation called request mapping, and inside I would say slash GitHub. So this would be the starting value of our endpoint for all the endpoints that we add in this GitHub controller. That can be done by using request mapping. So inside we need two things. We need to inject two things. One is the GitHub service class. So for that we need to create one GitHub service class. Let me create a package called service, and inside this service package I'll say something like GitHub service. So this is the GitHub service class that we created, and just for now I'll just mark it with a GitHub at service annotation and leave it alone. So coming back to our controller class, we say private, then the GitHub service, just GitHub service as the name. So this is the first thing that we have to inject, and the second thing is OAuth2 authorized client service, which is like an inbuilt thing provided from the OAuth2 dependency. So I would say OAuth2 authorized client service, and just give it the name as OAuth2 authorized client service itself. So these should be final, both the GitHub service as well as the OAuth2 authorized client service. It says we need to add constructor. So let me just click on this and say it says add constructor parameters, and we just added the GitHub service, and similarly we'll have to also add uh, OAuth2 authorized client service. So we are currently, let's mark this constructor with auto wired annotation. So we are injecting both the GitHub service, which is the service class which we created here, and the authorized client service, which is like the inbuilt class that is provided from the OAuth2 dependency. Next, let me create the get endpoint. So it would be get mapping, and inside I would say repo. So basically what this is telling is the endpoint starts with GitHub, and then if I say after GitHub, if I say slash repo, then we will be getting this repo endpoint. So for this I would say public. For now I'll keep the return type as void, because let's see what the return type for this particular thing would be. Maybe it would be a list of strings. Let's look at it, and I will give the name as get repo. It accepts one parameter, that is the OAuth2 authentication token. So I would say OAuth2 authentication token, which is present here, and I would give the name as authentication token itself. So this is the method which is get repo, and it accepts one parameter which is of type OAuth2 authentication token. So the next step is to get the access token. So using this access token as the authorization header, we can make all the requests to GitHub. So in order to get that particular access token, let me just create a private method called get access token. So I would say private string get access token, and this accepts one parameter, which is OAuth2 authentication token that we receive here. It's the same, so this method also accepts that, and I'll just give the name as OAuth authentication token. And did I say just one? It accepts one more parameter, my bad, that is a string. So this string is basically the client registration ID. So for our case, our client is GitHub, so this client registration ID would be just GitHub. uh, so while passing, while calling this particular get access token from this get repo method, we would pass in the hard coded value for the client registration ID, which is nothing but the GitHub. So next, let me just create a client of type OAuth2 authorized client, this one. So, and I'll just give it the name as client. And how can I get this client? There is one default method that is provided by OAuth2 dependency. Let's look at this. I'll just say OAuth2 authorized client service dot load authorized client, and it accepts two parameters. One is the client registration ID, which we have in the parameter, and the second one is we get that particular name that we get by using this authentication token. So which is nothing but authentication token dot get name. Let me just close this. So now let me bring this to next line so that we can see properly. So in this get access token, we are accepting two parameters, one of type OAuth2 authentication token and the other is just a string. And to build this OAuth2 authorized client, we need both the registration ID and the name of this authentication token. So after building the client, let me just check if this client is empty or whether it is null or not. If client not equal to null, if the client is not null, it means that the registration ID and the authentication token name is proper and the client is built successfully. In that case, we will try to access the token. So how can we get the access token? That we can do by using OAuth to access token and give it a name as access token itself, and we can get this by client dot get access token. So this is the method to get this particular OAuth2 access token. And next we will check whether this access token is not null. So we'll say if access token not equal to null, then you can just simply return this access token. So let's say return access token dot get token value. So this token value is of type string and our return type is also string. So from the get mapping method, we would just call this particular get access token. For that, we would say something like string access token, because the return type is of string and we are getting access token, and simply call the get access token and pass in the authentication token, and the registration ID would be nothing but GitHub. So this is the method call, and now we have the access token in this particular string value. So let me just give a brief on this because I think it was too much. So in this GitHub controller, this endpoint starts with GitHub and we are injecting two things. One is the GitHub service, which we created here, and the other is the OAuth2 authorized client service, which is a default class provided by the OAuth2 dependency. After injecting it, we created one a get endpoint that says slash repo, and currently we are keeping the return type as void. It would change in few minutes. Next, we have OAuth2 authentication token as a parameter for this get repo. So we need the access token in order to call any endpoint which is exposed by the GitHub. For that, in order to get that access token, we wrote a method which returns type string. So for that, we are accepting two parameters. One is the OAuth2 authentication token, which is present here, and the other is the of type string, which is nothing but the client registration ID. For us, in this case, it's just GitHub. So we are building a client of type OAuth2 authorized client. That we are doing by using this OAuth2 authorized client service, which we injected here. and we say we use the one default method called load authorized client. It is expecting two parameters. One is the registration ID, which is nothing but GitHub, and the other is the authentication token dot get name, the name of this authentication token. Once the if we confirm that the client is built successfully, we try to get the access token by using the get access token method. We just say client dot get access token, and if access token is not null, then we just return the token value of this particular access token, which gets stored in this access token. So the next step is we just need to call the GitHub endpoint by using this access token as the authorization header. For that, we will be using web client. That logic goes into GitHub service. So let me just open GitHub service and write a method to call GitHub client for listing all the repositories. So in this service class, we'll have to inject a web client. So I'll just say private final web client and give it the name as web client itself. So I'll have to add the constructor in order to in order for this error to go. So I'll just auto wire this and say public GitHub service, the name of the class, and inside I would say web client dot builder and give it the name as builder itself, or to be more specific, we can say it as web client builder, web client builder. And inside this, we have to say this dot web client equals. Here we'll have to add the base URL of the web client. For us, in case for our case, it is github.com. So I would say something like web client builder dot base URL would go something like https slash slash api dot github.com. So this would be the base URL. So for our every call, right, under this particular web client, we will be using this base URL, and the remaining URL will be mentioning it individually in the calls. So, and I would say dot build. So this is inside the constructor. So after this, now we'll have to specifically call this get all repositories. So for that, I'll just say public, and the return type of this would be mono of list of strings. So let's say list of string. Let me just import this class from Java util and mono also. So now I'll just give this method a name called get repos, and then this requires one parameter, that is the access token, which we got from the controller class using this method. That access token we will be passing here. So this access token will be used as the authorization header while calling the GitHub endpoint. So I would just say return web client dot get, and in the next line I would say dot the URI. How should the URI look like? So the URL looks like user slash repo. So if we this will be calling https api.github.com slash user slash repo. So it would list all the repositories present in that account. And next would be header. So the header that I need here is the authorization header. For this authorization header, I will be adding this access token. So how does this access token look like? First, we'll have to say bearer space and then add this access token. So always, whenever we are sending a bearer auth token, right, it should start with this bearer. So I'm adding it manually, hard-coded value here, and the header name is authorization. And next, we would retrieve this and then say body to flux. So body to flux is nothing but how would the response be? So we'll have to pass in the model class here, which is our what did we name it as, GitHub repo response. So it's GitHub repo response dot class. So this would be the body to flux, and next thing we have to do is map. So here what are we doing? We are mapping the GitHub repo response to get name. So we just need one single field, which is the name, and we'll be getting it by mapping it to this GitHub repo response model. And the next thing we have to do is just collect list and end it here. So basically what we did in the service classes, we injected this web client, and built this particular web client by passing the base url as this api.github.com, and then we wrote a method which returns mono of list of strings called get repos, and it is using this access token as the authorization header, and the URI looks something like this, and we are sending the request to the web client. Here for us it is the github.com. So if I come to my controller, I just have to call the GitHub service dot get repos and pass in the access token which we occupied here. So it is returning list of strings. So I would say uh, mono of list of strings and give it a name as repos. And at the end I'll just have to return this list of string. So I would say return repos, but the problem here is I've given the return type as void, so I'll change that from void to mono of list of strings. So now the error is gone, but still I have one error in the controller class which says missing return statement for this particular thing. Okay, what if you know if this access token is not present? So if what if it is null? Here if it is not null, we are returning something, but what if it's not null? So for that, if it is not null, then it should come here, and I would say throw new runtime exception. So this should solve us. So if it is null, then it throws a runtime exception. So this was so this is all the code that we need to get all the repositories. We created the repo response model class, then the controller. In the controller we got the access token which is used in the service class as the authorization header. So now let's just test it out and look whether our code works. This is all the code we need to run the application or to get all the repositories. So let me just run the application and see whether this works. So port started on the port 8080. So let me jump into browser, say localhost 8080. So the front page is running properly. Let me just say localhost 8080 slash github slash repo. No, it's just repo, not repositories, if I remember properly. Yeah, it's just the repo. And if I hit enter, I'm getting an unexpected error of 500 internal server error. And if I see in the console, so there's a good opportunity for us, to debug it as well. Uh, Let me just expand this, and it says checkpoint 404 not endpoint. So this API github.com user slash repo, it says it's not found. Let me have a look at the documentation. It's repos, not repo. So if I come to my service class and change this from repo to repos, and if I stop my application and run it again, hopefully it should work this time. Let this run. application started, and if I refresh, yeah, now there is only one repository, which says Sumantas, and now we are able to successfully, you can see this all the repositories. So the only change that we had to do is add this yes, it's user slash repos, not user slash repo. So change that, and it will work for you guys as well. So this was all for this video. If you have learned something new, please do subscribe to our channel and support us. If you have any questions, suggestions, or requests, please do let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like the video. See you in the next video.